Started. Welcome to the May 20th Victim Compensation Board meeting. Council, would you please call the roll?
Member Shavaro. Currently absent. Member Becton.
Present.
Chair Ravel.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Item 1 is the approval of the minutes for the March 18, 2021 board meeting.
Started. Welcome to the May 20th Victim Compensation Board meeting. Council, would you please call the roll?
Member Shavaro.
Sorry, hold on. We may have some technical difficulties there.
Are there any discussions, additions, or corrections to the minutes from board members? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve item 1?
So moved.
I'll second.
Is there any public comment on this item?
Hearing none, Council, will you please call the roll?
Certainly. The motion before the board is the approval of the March 18th, 2021 board meeting minutes. Member Shavaro. Absent. Member Becton.
Yes.
Chair Ravel.
Yes.
Motion passes.
The next item is public comment. Item number 2. This is the opportunity for the public to comment on items that are not on the agenda. As any items discussed during public comment have not been agendized, the board is not permitted to take any action on these matters at this meeting. Please note, if you wish to offer public comment regarding item 7, the proposal to approve trauma recovery center grant awards, or any of the PC 4900 cases, there will be a separate call for public comment when each item is heard by the board. For those on the phone, if you previously indicated your desire to offer comments during this agenda item, we will be calling on you by name or phone number. For those participating via Zoom, please raise your hand if you wish to offer comment, and we will acknowledge you and let you know when it is your turn to speak. Anyone would like to make a public comment?
Ms. Borrell, we do have 2 hands up, Nikki McCallum and Leah Spellman.
Okay, Ms. McCallum, if you can go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Nikki McCallum, and I'm the Counseling Services Director for Youth Alive in Oakland. Our mission is to prevent violence and create community leaders. We would like to thank the board for removing all barriers for victims seeking mental health telehealth services during the stay-at-home orders. It is proven invaluable, and it is our hope that this change becomes permanent beyond the pandemic. In addition to serving our typical client population, we've seen a more than 50% increase in engagement with clients who have access challenges related to in-person services. Some examples include clients dealing with major safety concerns that could also put providers at risk, those with transportation challenges and childcare challenges, and those with emotional and/or physical trauma that prevents or limits in-person services. One example is our Circle of Care grief group. For parents who have lost a child to homicide, we've seen a 75% increase in the number of participants and a 50% increase in ongoing engagement. Many parents are expressing heartfelt gratitude that telehealth has increased their ability to connect with others who understand their pain and their experience. At Youth Alive, we're committed to meeting our clients where they're at, and we would like to request that the board consider permanently removing restrictions regarding telehealth. This will enhance the ability of so many providers in creating the most flexible, equitable services to support victims of crime on their path to healing. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Now, Ms. Spellman, if you would go ahead.
Sorry, I just had one quick clarification question. When you mentioned there would be a separate call for item 7, did you mean also during this meeting today, or is that happening at a separate time?
No, during this meeting, it will be a separate call during item 7 for public comment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to make a public comment?
We have
Hearing-
Margaret Petros with their hand up.
Okay. Ms. Petros, go ahead. You have to unmute.
Thank you. Good morning. Will we be allowed on the agenda item for a specific claim that's recommended for denial, or do I need to do it under the public comments?
You would need to make your comment now.
Oh, thank you.
Mhm.
I'm glad I raised my hands. Good morning. My name is Margaret Petros. I'm the Executive Director for Mothers Against Murder, a community-based organization that assists families and survivors of murder. Item number 10 on the agenda is recommended for a denial. The incident happened in October 2019, and the amount of time and efforts that we all have put into this claim that I believe should have been allowed within few hours of the incident. It's a homicide, 18-year-old that lives in a gang-infested neighborhood that has been a victim of domestic violence, witnessed as a child where his mother was severely a DV victim, has a disadvantage in so many different aspects of life. His mother sends him to get bread for her, and he gets stabbed and killed. The police allege he confronted the suspect. So physically, and the word aggressively is used, although we don't know what that is because we have had no ability to access public records that can intelligently make us advocate for this case. The board, the program has finally received a crime report, but refuses to share it with us. So you have an advantage. You have attorneys that are trained, who have worked on denying this claim compared to a victim who has had no legal representation, a Spanish speaker that can barely speak English. Again, a domestic violence victims, a woman who works as a babysitter and took a house cleaner. Again, financially disadvantaged, and so many other reasons why this woman needs help, why this program is designed and the legislation requires that every effort is made to help these victims. Instead, because the 18-year-old aggressively approached, again, we don't know what aggressively means. He had no weapons on him. He was not wearing any gang-related clothing. He never, ever assaulted the suspect or even did anything that is illegal. He physically confronted. He did not hit anyone. And then the press release said very quickly the suspect pulled a knife and stabbed him. The victim runs for his life and collapses and dies. The police department makes only one phone call to the family, one, to tell them who the detective is. They never answered the mother's call for more information. And I believe the police is really intervening with the eligibility because of their unhappiness that the family, with my help, went to the media to complain that the police are just not talking to the family. I know the mother is cooperative because I met with them 10 days after the incident. And I made contacts with the lieutenants, with the chief, even the mayor's office, begging that the detectives talk to the family. Yet no one has talked to the family since October 2019. And years later, the police say the mother is not cooperative. No one from the victim services unit or the board's management, including the chief counsel, asks the police exactly what is the mother doing that you label her as uncooperative. The claim was denied without a copy of the crime report in violation of a government code section. There has been so many codes, regulations, and policies that were violated on this claim. And I would plead with you to actually read the documents that I've emailed to the board rather than just take the recommendation of the staff. Please read everything, because this is not just about one case, it's about how much effort has been put to deny this claim, and incorrectly, illegally. There are guidelines, policies that say, look at the age of the victim. He was only 18. Look at his medical and mental condition. I have even submitted the prescriptions for this victim's medication for post-trauma. Nobody has even answered, well, why the mitigating factor, even if there was involvement, why did the policies not considered to find a way to allow this claim? Please look at the documents. There are tons of facts that gives a reason to allow this claim. The mother has been so stressed. When we had the phone hearing with the hearing officer, again, an attorney, this was recorded. Listen to it, please. Again, it's for reasons to make changes to this program. The hearing officer asked me to go out and find witnesses and put the burden on me as advocate and the mother to find witnesses. Well, this is not our job. This is the job of the police department. Why aren't they doing it? No one has been arrested, identified, or questioned, yet the victim has been already found guilty a few days after the crime. It is horrible how this family was treated and how this whole incident been looked at blaming the victim. I don't want to take more of your precious time at a public hearing, but there are written documents that I've submitted that I really need you to look at and determine if this claim should or shouldn't be allowed. I am someone with 36 years experience in this program. I managed the Santa Clara County Victim Assistance Center for 18 years. I know the policies, I've been trained. I would have allowed this claim with my eyes closed. Yet,
Ms. Petros, I'm sorry to interrupt. We have a lot of other business on the agenda today. If you'd be able to wrap up in the next minute or so.
I will, I want to say I appreciate your time, but again, look at the details of this case before you make your final decision, only because you need to understand how this program is working, the waste of resources and the cost involved in denying these claims. And that's what I'm asking. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Chair Ravel, a point of clarification. Ms. Petros is referring to the closed session agenda item 10, not the agenda item 10 that is currently in the binders. And also, I'd like to reflect for the record that Member Shavaro has also joined us.
Thank you, Council. Do we have any other public comment on items not on the agenda?
I don't see any more hands raised.
It looks like Eric Gallegos is trying to get our attention that he'd like to offer comment.
Yeah, may I make a comment, please? Hello.
Please go ahead.
Hello, my name is Eric Gallegos, and my application number is A20-790-9427. And I'm letting you know that I am one of the individual who's deafblind, a deafblind citizen. And I'm here today to let the board know to please reconsider the denial decision they have made. And I'm just informing that the denial is just very wrong. And I agree with the previous comment person that it is not fair to take the staff's recommendation, because technically, how do you know that the staff is right? Because technically they don't take into consideration what happens outside the box. I am a victim for a very long time, and this is the time that to please stop denying that, because think about this. I understand that you have your own lawyers, yes, but do you think that other victims will be able to avoid a lawyer? No, they all would not be able to avoid that. And I mean, what is the point of this government policy and victims compensation board if you keep denying, the more you deny, you're letting the perpetrators win? That needs to stop. And technically, perpetrators, some of the perpetrators have the criteria. They require sight. They require some kind of knowledge of the policy, how to work, and some of it will take advantage of that. Needs to stop. And lastly, and most important thing, I am not able to get the medical and mental health therapy to overcome traumas. Why? Because one of your own trauma centers, Straight United, is discriminating me just because I am deafblind. They didn't want to provide silent language interpreters, and that's wrong. And not only that, they're denying me because of my gender and my sexuality. That's a violation of US Constitution, and I have that evidence today. And the reason I'm letting you know this is because I am documenting this as well. And I'm gonna show you the evidence. Do you realize how your own staff member who make a recommendation to deny it's very wrong when you don't realize that Straight United is discriminating? And there are a lot of university articles that shows hurting deaf patients happens through denial of interpreting services. So I understand I have a limited time. I just want to express that I am very frustrated with not getting justice. I have every right as any other American citizen, and as well as any victim, to get justice. So please reconsider, because tomorrow's the last day of my response period. I just want to present my comment, and then the conclusion of this meeting, I'm going to give you my response of appeal. Please reconsider. I'm gonna do whatever it takes to pursue justice. I have every right. Justice, it's part of the healing process. I will not tolerate these perpetrators to get away what they did wrong. Thank you for listening to my comment. Thank you for your time.
I don't see anyone else.
May we have clarification which item on the agenda that gentleman was speaking to?
Actually, Mr. Gallegos was on the agenda last March for the March board. His proposed decision was on the March board.
The prior meeting to this one.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct. What Mr. Gallegos is referring to is he's going to submit documentation to support his request for reconsideration of that decision.
I see.
Because tomorrow is the last day of my 60 days period.
Thank
I want
you.
to thank you all for appearing before the board and taking time to give us your public comments.
Okay, we'll move to item 3. Item 3 is the executive officer statement, which will be presented by Executive Officer Linda Gledhill.
Good morning, board members. We have a busy agenda today, so I will be brief, but there are a few important items that I wanted to update you on. As I've mentioned previously, we've been working to update the CalVCB strategic plan, as the previous version only ran to 2018. The 2021-24 CalVCB strategic framework, which is now on our website, outlines our mission, vision, core values, and goals. These will be pivotal to our work as we move forward. Our mission as CalVCB is to be a trusted partner in providing restorative financial assistance to victims of crime, and our vision is to help victims of crime restore their lives. Our values of integrity, respect, compassion, dedication, collaboration, and innovation are at the heart of the work we do every day. We have 3 distinct goals for the strategic plan. 1, to promote access to CalVCB services. 2, to improve the CalVCB experience. And 3, to develop and engage staff to best serve victims. We'll be working on developing detailed plans to achieve all of these goals, but I'm pleased that these ideas have already been incorporated into much of our work. You will see and hear today about our new website, launched just 2 weeks ago, which helps us promote access to CalVCB and improve the CalVCB experience for victims. The transformation of our website was one of my first priorities when I came to CalVCB. Our old site was filled with text and very difficult to navigate. It didn't appear welcoming or friendly or easy to use for our primary audience, victims of crime. The new site is designed to be a place where victims can find the help that they need. I want to especially thank our team at CalVCB who worked so hard in this effort, led by Andrew Lamar. They include Mandy Duran, Kimberly Keys, and Jessica Jarity. Last week, I hosted our quarterly CalVCB Advisory Committee meeting. These ongoing meetings are a chance to connect with the victim services community. We shared with them our new online advocate portal, which we are rolling out statewide. This is another example of improving the CalVCB experience for our users. We are continuing conversations with committee members and small groups to talk more about CalVCB policies, the statutes governing us, and how to best serve victims. We've been reviewing policies to make sure they align with statutes. In some cases, this has resulted in updating policies, and we are working hard to make sure our partners understand these changes. As an organization, we're also looking at how we can grow. That is why we will be applying for a federal Office of Victims of Crime grant to use technology to assist victims of crime, especially those in underserved communities. I will keep you posted on the status of that effort. Finally, we continue to find ways to connect with staff as we continue to work remotely. In April, we marked Crime Victims' Rights Week and Denim Day on our digital platforms. And on Denim Day, we had a special guest speaker with our all staff, Beth Hassett, the CEO of Weave, which is a Sacramento-based organization helping victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. She spoke to the staff about their work and the importance of our work at CalVCB and how the two connect. So with that, I am happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments from the board? Thank you very much for the update, Ms. Gladhill.
Okay, item 4 is the legislative update, which will be presented by Deputy Executive Officer Andrew Lamar.
Good morning, board members. In your agenda is a list of all the legislation we are tracking, all the bills that could impact the CalVCB and where they are in the process. Today, the appropriations committees in each house is meeting to determine the fate of hundreds of bills. The legislation that clears that hurdle must pass out of their houses of origin by June 4th. Also, as you know, the governor issued his May revised update to the budget, and the legislative budget committees are hard at work to finalize a budget to be passed by June 15th. In the budget update, there are no significant changes for CalVCB. As for legislation, we continue to have an open dialogue with the sponsors of SB 299, which would compensate victims of police violence. We've worked with them to answer questions about how the bill, as written, would be implemented and what would be the costs. In addition, we recently met with the sponsors of AB 1007, which would compensate the victims of forced sterilization, to talk about how implementation of the bill might work and any barriers we might face to identifying and verifying the victims. Those are the highlights. Like everyone else, following the legislature, we're watching to see what happens today and which bills will move to the other house of the legislature in June. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Deputy Director Lamar. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
Seeing none, is there any public comment on this item? We will now move to item 5, which is the contract report, which will be presented by Executive Officer Linda Gledhill.
Thank you. I'm reporting to you on several contracts Cal VCB has executed in the last 2 months as reflected in the contract report in your binder. First, we contracted with the California Prison Industry Authority to print first responder cards in Braille. First responder cards are given to law enforcement so that they can pass them out to victims of crime. It provides the victim information about Cal VCB and how to contact us. This contract was paid for through the Cal OES grant that we acquired a couple years ago. And this was an effort to reach, again, a population that we don't often serve and will allow law enforcement to provide appropriate contact information to victims of crime that they may find. And next, we are replacing our mailing machines, which are currently at the end of their life and often go down for maintenance. Mailing letters to claimants is a critical function at Cal VCB, and replacing these machines has been a top priority. All the other contracts listed are extensions of current contracts to meet ongoing needs. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Officer Gledhill. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
Seeing none, is there any public comment on this item? I don't see any. Let's move to item 6. Item 6 is a demonstration of the new Cal VCB website, which will be presented by Deputy Executive Officer Andrew Lamar.
Good morning. As Linda mentioned, we've launched a new website that we think is a big improvement for everyone, and especially for the victims we serve. Staff worked closely with our vendor 10up every step of the way in developing the site. 10up is a digital services company that has worked with several state departments, including DMV. We're pleased with the final product. I want to thank everyone who helped to make this a reality, and I want to thank 10up and their team, which was terrific to work with. Now I'd like to introduce Brian Bourne, 10up's Associate Director of Client Strategy, who will give us an overview of the new site and how it was developed.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me. I'm going to share my screen just to show a couple of slides that were presented with all of the board materials. So I'll make a brief note that the agenda is quite full. So like Andrew said, we've been working with the Cal VCB team since last fall. They've been fantastic to work with, and we are mutually happy with the finished product. If you remember a few months back, we presented some design concepts to the board and outlined that these were the overall project goals that we feel were successful in the execution of the project. And here's a quick couple screenshots of the finished product. As you can see, the design is much more clean, relaxed, easy to read. We've lowered the cognitive load required to absorb the information, helped reorganize all of the content, and made a focus on performance and speed and accessibility compliance for site users who may or may not be sighted, may use assistive technologies and or only use a mobile device as their primary means of accessing the information of that. One of the key features besides a revamped design and easier to read and use site was the local and online resources directory, where we have cataloged thousands of various resources that are available county specific or online, and made it searchable through county filters and or services type, and listing relative online services specific to someone's region. The new website was built on an open source content management system called WordPress that is the state's preferred CMS in use for websites, that allows for highly flexible and highly customizable content management controls that the Public Affairs Office did not have previously with the new site. And this puts in their hands the ability to edit nearly every piece of content through flexible page layouts and then global controls as seen in this screenshot in the content management system. Overall, we're very happy with the project. We think it turned out great. And we've got a couple of minutes. I'd love to any feedback, questions, comments, or anything, any additional information I can provide.
Well, thank you both very much. It looks terrific. Really great work. I'm very pleased with it. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, we will move to item 7. So item 7 is the proposal to approve Trauma Recovery Center grant awards. This item will also be presented by Deputy Executive Officer Andrew Lamar.
All right, I'm going to share my screen here, so give me one moment. All right, we will get started here today.
Sorry, Andrew, we still can't see your shared screen.
Oh, you know, I love it when this happens. Thank you. What did I do? Of course, I messed it up. One moment, please. All right. Let's try this.
Perfect.
All right, thank you for your patience. We will get started. Today, I'm presenting the staff recommendation on awarding grants to trauma recovery centers for the next 2-year grant cycle, which begins on July 1st. I'm going to give you a quick overview of TRCs and the grant application process and explain how we arrived at our staff recommendation. And then, of course, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. What is a trauma recovery center? A center that provides evidence-based mental health and case management services to victims of violent crime and their loved ones. TRCs are a model of care for victims pioneered by UC San Francisco and now used across the country. There are 10 core elements as defined by government statute. Some of the 10 core elements include providing assertive outreach and engagement with underserved populations, serving victims of all types of violent crimes, treating all clients with complex problems regardless of their emotional or behavioral issues, and using a multidisciplinary treatment team that includes psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, and marriage and family therapists. The TRC grant program began at Cal BCB in 2013-14. Each spring, Cal BCB awards TRC grants that begin July 1st and run for 2 years for the recipients. We do this through a competitive grant process that is spelled out in government statute. The process starts with Cal BCB posting the Notice of Funds Available, or NOFA, on our website. The NOFA provides explicit instructions on what is required for applications, including supporting documents such as budget worksheets. Applicants must provide comprehensive answers to a long list of questions and explain and verify how they will meet the grant requirements required by law. All applications received by the deadline are scored by a committee. The scoring process is rigorous, and it often takes the scoring committee months to do. For instance, for the first part of this process, the original NOFA was posted in November, the deadline for submitting applications was in December, and scoring the original applications concluded in mid-February. How are grants funded? TRC grants are funded by 10% of the annual savings the Department of Finance estimates are part of the result of Proposition 47, the Safe Neighborhoods and Schools Act, which voters passed in 2014, and by $2 million from the State Restitution Fund. On Friday, the Department of Finance locked in its savings estimate. The result is we have a total of $13,003,850 to provide for the TRC grants in this cycle. To put this in context, we provided $11.7 million in TRC grants in 2020 for 7 grantees, $9.4 million in 2019 for 8 grantees, and $8.1 million in 2018 for 6 grantees. As you'll recall, at the March meeting, staff recommended funding 7 TRCs. After some discussion, the board decided to table the matter. To make sure the issues raised at that meeting were adequately addressed, we amended the original NOFA and asked supplemental questions of all who applied and had applications scored. We issued the amended NOFA on April 13th. We asked for additional information on the need for services in areas served by TRCs. the vulnerable populations they serve, and what they are doing to overcome obstacles created by the pandemic. The amended applications were due by April 26th. Then, of course, we scored the applications based on the new information. 12 TRCs, including 5 new TRCs, received passing scores and met minimum qualifications and are eligible for funding. The total grant amount requested by the passing applicants is $25.6 million. The total amount that is available for the grants is $13 million. As a result, we thought long and hard about what is the best way to distribute grant money. One option was to fully fund some of the TRCs. For instance, we could fund the top scorers for what they requested, but then have nothing for TRCs that scored lower. The money would run out after the top scoring 6 or 7 TRCs. Another option was to fund all 12 TRCs with passing scores and divide the money up in some reasonably equitable fashion. We could provide equal amounts to each of the 12 or provide slightly different amounts to each based on scores or some other metric. We had many long discussions about this. Foremost in our minds was what is best for victims. How can we maximize the services available and the number of victims reached? We also consider what would be best for TRCs. It would make no sense to provide so little in grant money as to not allow individual TRCs to run their programs. Historically, CalVCB has always funded all grant applications with passing scores. We explored numerous different funding scenarios in search of the best approach. In your board materials, you will see that we included 2 other options, in addition to what we are recommending today. That gives you an idea of the different ways this could be approached. Our recommendation is to fund all 12 TRCs with passing scores, in keeping with CalVCB's historical actions. Because our analysis of applications is thorough and provides a good sense of the quality of the proposed programs, we think the application scores should be taken into account in determining award amounts. So our recommendation weights the funding amounts based on application score. Third, we considered need, the amount the grantee requested. So with those 3 main pillars, we drafted our recommendation. All 12 get grants, and the awards are based on what they requested, with a percentage of what they received based on their scores. So higher scored applications receive a higher percentage of what they requested, and that percentage gradually declines with application scores. Thank you for your time and attention. Now I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks very much, Deputy Lamar. I really appreciate all the work that staff have done on this and the thought that you've put into this, into helping to rectify some of the issues that were raised at the last meeting and make sure that items that weren't considered on the first round would be considered this time around. It's always tough when you've got limited resources to go around, but it seems to me that this is the staff recommendation is the fairest way to distribute the funds. But I know we've got a lot of public comment, but I want to have my colleagues have the opportunity to ask questions or make comments before we move to public comment. So is there any comment or questions from the board?
Well, Dinah Beckton here. I just wanted to thank and appreciate all of the work that has gone into making the recommendation that we have before us today. I understand that there's really not an easy way to consider how to go about distributing the funds. And so thank you for all of the work that you've done. Appreciate it.
All right, so is there a motion for item 7 to approve the staff recommendation? I'll move to approve the staff recommendation. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we can move to public comment now. I know that there's a lot of folks waiting to talk about this issue.
Go ahead and, is there any public comment on this item? Go ahead, Mr. Macias.
Thank you, Ms. Burrell. Good rising relatives, and thank you for allowing me to share my voice in this sacred space. I think the collective work that we do in preserving the dignity, humanity, and rights of those impacted by crime is sacred work. I also want to acknowledge that the board did address the inequities that existed in the original NOFA back in March, and we are grateful that the people of San Joaquin County will still have access to mental health services via the Stockton Trauma Recovery Center. But I do want to talk about the recommended scenario. I am appreciative of Mr. Lamar's work and of the panel's work as a whole. It is not easy to determine how to distribute funds when you have limited availability. But the process is akin to telling this board that you have the capacity to make the decision, but I'm going to compensate you on that work based on who's best dressed. And that seems wholly inconsistent with how we approach this work, because it says that the people of Orange County are more worthy than the people of Contra Costa County, or the people of Los Angeles County are more worthy than the people of San Joaquin County. I mean, I don't think that's what we're trying to do here. I think what we're trying to do is make sure that there is equitable access for all. And in that approach, I hope that this board will consider looking at options 2 and 3 to ensure that there is not one program that has to work from a starting line that's 200 yards behind everybody else. It puts different counties at disadvantages. So I thank you for this time and hope that you will consider these thoughts.
Thank you. Ms. Spellman, please.
Thank you so much. I echo Mr. Macias's comments in recognizing the complexities that the board has to attend to when making these decisions. And I would also urge a reconsideration of options 2 and 3. Actually, our preferred ask would be to fund pre-existing TRCs at their previous levels, and then to use the funds remaining both to distribute to new TRCs and to fund pre-existing TRCs at a higher level. And there are reasons for that. One is, again, a consideration of equity. There are several TRCs on this list that are recommended for funding at 1.8 or 2.3 million, but the requirements set out by VCB are the same. I'm the executive director of Partnerships for Trauma Recovery, which is a TRC recommended for a lower level of funding, but we're being asked to meet a higher and higher level of requirements, but to do less with that. And that's a particularly difficult pill to swallow when considering that we were also one of the organizations that was recommended for funding in the original round of 7 organizations, and we were recommended for funding at over $1 million. So now we're being recommended for funding at half of that. And our recommended amount isn't half of some wildly aspirational budget and for where we want to grow as an organization. It's half of our current programming. And we just, to be able to do the programming that we're currently doing with that drastic a cut in funding is untenable. So the impact of that is on crime survivors. It's particularly on services like case management. And it ultimately means that existing TRCs who have a wide array of commitments to current crime survivors are not going to be able to fulfill their mandate and essentially provide services where there's a gap and where there are no other service agencies who can provide that same crime victim population with services. So in keeping in some of the logic that was outlined very nicely by CalVCB, they stated that staff considered many ways to approach this, including options to fund only the highest scoring applicants or existing TRCs. My request aligns with that in asking them to recognize that there is an existing level of funding for current TRCs and obligations that go along with that for us to serve crime survivors. And I would also point out that they noted historical precedents. It's our understanding that what has happened in the past is that new TRCs have been funded at a lower level. And within this year's recommendations, there is included new TRCs at quite a high funding level. So we believe that TRCs should absolutely be held accountable for the services that we're providing. And one way that we can do that is to start out at a lower level of funding and then to have funding increased at the point we've proven that we can in fact meet the obligations and the deliverables outlined in our proposals. That seems to be what has been done historically. And so we're asking for that to be done here. Thank you so much for your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Spellman. Next, we have Ms. Bacalari. Sorry if I said it wrong.
Yes, hello. I'm Dr. Alicia Bacalari, and I'm the founder of the UCSF TRC model, which is the model that's being used to be replicated throughout California and the rest of the country. I want to, from the bottom of my heart, thank the board and CalVCB for all of your support for the TRCs over these last several years. I particularly want to acknowledge the amount of thought and consideration that went into the funding. It's very clear you all have spent a lot of time on this. I am one of the biggest proponents of spreading the model throughout California, and I would love to have many, many, many TRCs than we have right now. So I'm in agreement with that. However, I would suggest that what is being recommended right now for the 7 current TRCs that are up for funding, 6 of them would end up having a budget cut. In some cases, some of the TRCs would have half of their budgets cut. What that would mean would be not only would staff be laid off, but cases that they are currently carrying. These are patients that their cases would have to be closed, and the communities that have gotten used to having TRCs would end up having much less available. The other thing, for example, in one case, one of the TRC's budget would be cut to $482,000 over a 2-year period. That's $240,000 a year. It would be impossible for them to meet all of the regulations around staffing for that TRC. I know a lot of consideration has gone into this. I would just really humbly suggest that the current TRCs be renewed for their funding at the same level that they were, or if they scored higher, at a higher level. And then the monies that are left over, then look at that to fund new TRCs. It just doesn't seem reasonable to put all of this money over the last several years into building these programs only to cut their funding. So that's one of the things that I would recommend. And kind of going forward, I work with all of the states. There are now 8 states that are replicating TRCs, and I'm a grant reviewer for most of those states. And typically what they do is to, if they're coming up for competitive renewal, is to have a format to look at existing TRCs, fund them, and then have a separate process for new TRCs. The other thing I just would like to say is that the current TRCs should be evaluated not just on what they have written in a grant, but on the quality of services that they are providing. And I know that's a lot to ask, but you know, again, I say this to you all, and I know how much work has gone into it. But if you could all take this into consideration, I think we would all appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands raised, so I'll turn it over to you, the chair.
Thank you, and thank you all for your comments. Is there any other discussion before the board before we go to a roll vote? Okay, Council, will you please call the roll?
Certainly. The motion before the board is the approval of the Trauma Recovery Center grant awards as recommended by staff. Member Shavaro. You're on mute, Member Shavaro.
Aye.
Thank you. Member Becton.
Aye.
Chair Revel.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Items 8 is the Penal Code Section 4900 claim of Arturo Jimenez, which will be presented by Chief Counsel Kim Gutierrez.
And you'll have to excuse me. I have allergies and they're in my chest, and so I'm coughing a lot right now. So I apologize if there's some interruption in my presentation. Good morning. On March 12, 2021, Arturo Jimenez filed a claim as an erroneously convicted person pursuant to Penal Code Section 4900. That application was based on the 1995 murder conviction for which he was found factually innocent by the Los Angeles County Superior Court after 24 years in prison. The application requested compensation for the entire incarceration period of 9,045 days, an amount of $1,266,300. The Office of the Attorney General opposed that calculation for failing to deduct 105 days Mr. Jimenez was serving an overlapping sentence for a valid 1994 robbery conviction. The proposed decision recommends that the application be granted in part and that the legislature appropriate $1,251,600, which represents $140 per day for the 8,940 days Mr. Jimenez was wrongfully imprisoned solely as a result of the murder conviction. The recommended or the proposed decision further recommends denying compensation for the 105 days that Mr. Jimenez was concurrently serving a valid robbery sentence. Today, Mr. Jimenez is represented by David McLean of McLean, Bednarski, and Litt, along with co-counsel Caitlin Weisberg and Ellen Eggers. The Office of the Attorney General is represented by Deputy Attorney General Barton Bowers.
Thank you, counsel. We will hear first from counsel for Mr. Jimenez.
Good morning, board members. This is David McLean with McLean, Bednarski, and Litt, and we represent Mr. Jimenez, who's present on this Zoom. We are speaking to you from Pasadena, California, and also present here, but out of picture, is his partner, Megan Baca, and also Ellen Eggers. And I just wanted to mention Ellen Eggers because she was very significant in the life of Arturo Jimenez. Mr. Jimenez was convicted, as counsel said, in 1995, and he always believed in his innocence, and his parents, immigrants from the state of Jalisco, Mexico, also believed in his innocence. And they worked hard to find someone who believed in Mr. Jimenez. They found Ellen Eggers, an attorney who devotes her life for freeing and working on cases for wrongfully convicted persons, people who are in prison but are serving time for crimes they do not commit. Ellen Eggers took an interest in Mr. Jimenez's case in 2012, approximately, and worked tirelessly from that point to work with Mr. Jimenez, investigate the case, re-interview all the witnesses. These are very difficult cases to pursue, these habeas corpus petitions. And she gathered all the evidence. Witnesses recanted, evidence was uncovered that pointed to his innocence, and she presented it along with Paige Caneb of the Northern California Innocence Project up north in Santa Clara, associated with Santa Clara University. And they presented the evidence to the court, and the habeas corpus petition was granted. And in August 12, 2020, he was exonerated and his underlying criminal case was dismissed. Subsequently, our office, along with Ellen Eggers and Paige Caneb, we worked on a motion for factual innocence, and that was granted by the Superior Court, and we're here today. But I just want to say something about Mr. Jimenez. He's someone who spent, from the date of his arrest on October 14th, 1994 to August 12th, 2020, he spent 25.5 years in prison for a murder he didn't commit, as recognized by everyone, including the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office, who didn't oppose the motion for factual innocence. And it's amazing that he persevered those 25 years with dignity and grace. And you see him today. He's right next to me. And he does not have anger in his heart. He is now working for Prisons of Peace, which is a program started by law professors at Pepperdine University, and is working with inmates in prison now on restorative justice. So he's trying to give back to people in prison. He's a remarkable human being. And the grant of compensation, we appreciate the board. We accept the findings of the board with the deduction. And we want to thank the California Victims Compensation Board, the staff members who worked on this case, and the board for granting his claim. And if you have any questions for Mr. Jimenez, he's right here next to me and is more than happy to answer them. And I just want to thank the board and the California Victims Compensation Board for their work on this case.
Thank you, counsel. Mr. Jimenez, would you like to address the board?
I would just like to say thank you for, granting compensation. It would really help after, spending 25.5 years, in prison for a crime I didn't commit, to, get on my, help me and my family, at least recover a lot of the financial losses, we undertook behind this conviction. And that's all I gotta say. Thank you. I'm grateful.
Thank you, Mr. Jimenez. Now we'll hear from Mr. Barton Bowers of the Attorney General's office.
Mr. Bowers, you might be on mute. There you go.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Hello. This is Barton Bowers on behalf of the Attorney General. The Attorney General agrees with the proposed decision, and we urge the board to adopt it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bowers. And I'd just like to recognize both for Mr. Jimenez and our other claimants in the 4,900 cases today, just the serious injustice that you suffered and the years that you lost because of that. Is there any discussion on this item by the board? Do I have a motion on item 8?
I move to adopt the hearing officer's proposed decision in the Penal Code Section 4900 matter of Mr. Arturo Jimenez.
Second?
I second the motion.
Is there any public comment? Okay, hearing none. Council, will you please call the roll?
Motion before the board is the adoption of the hearing officer's proposed decision in the Penal Code Section 4900 matter of Arturo Jimenez. Member Shavarro.
Aye.
Member Becton.
Aye.
Chair Ravel.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Item 9 is the Penal Code Section 4900 claim of Robert Fennenbach, which will also be presented by Chief Counsel Kim Gutierrez.
Robert Fennenbach filed an application as an erroneously convicted person with the California Victim Compensation Board on April 14th of 2021. The application was based on his 1994 murder conviction, for which he was found factually innocent by the Solano County Superior Court after serving 27 years in prison. The proposed decision recommends compensation in the amount of $1,425,060, which represents $140 per day for the 10,179 days Mr. Fennenbach was wrongfully imprisoned. Today, Mr. Fennenbach is represented by George Harris of the Norton Law Firm, and the Attorney General's office is represented by Deputy Attorney General Barton Bowers.
Thank you, counsel. We'll hear first from counsel for Mr. Fennenbach.
Thank you, and I'll be very brief, but thank you to the Victims Compensation Board for acting very promptly and accurately and justly in this regard. And so we agree with the proposed decision in all regards. And let me note that Mr. Fennenbach was represented throughout this process also by the Northern California Innocence Project and Paige Koenig and Melissa McConnell in particular, and also Jim Bennett from the Morrison Forster firm. But as shown in the court rulings that we presented with the claim form, Mr. Fennenbach did spend 10,179 days wrongfully convicted for a murder he did not commit. Solano Superior Court granted his habeas order. The appeal of that was dismissed. The court also found that the case should be dismissed in its entirety based on outrageous government conduct, which led to the wrongful conviction. And as noted, the court also found by a preponderance of evidence that Mr. Fennenbach was factually innocent. And so gratefully, Mr. Fennenbach is now getting to know his grandchildren, and we appreciate very much the work of the board and the committee, and certainly support its proposed decision in all regards.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. If Mr. Fennenbach is present, would he like to address the board?
Mr. Fennenbach is not present, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Okay, Mr. Bowers.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Very good. Once again, Martin Bowers, on behalf of the Attorney General, we also agree with the proposed decision and ask that it be granted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bowers. Is there any discussion on this item by the board? Seeing none, do I have a motion on item 9?
I move approval.
A second?
A second.
Is there any public comment on this item?
Council, will you please call the roll?
Motion on the table is the adoption of the hearing officer's proposed decision in the Penal Code Section 4900, matter of Robert Fennenbach. Member Shavaro.
Aye.
Member Becton.
Yes.
Chair Rabel.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Item 10 is the Penal Code Section 4900 claim of Andrew Wilson, which will also be presented by Chief Counsel Kim Gauthier.
Mr. Wilson filed an application as an erroneously convicted person with the California Victim Compensation Board in March of 2019. The application was based on a 1986 murder conviction for which he was found factually innocent by the Los Angeles Superior Court in February 2021 after serving 32 years in prison. The proposed decision is an automatic grant of compensation as he meets the criteria in statute for the amount of $1,650,880, which represents $140 per day for the 11,792 days Mr. Wilson was wrongfully imprisoned. Adam Grant of the Loyola Law School Project for the Innocent represents Mr. Wilson in this matter, and the Attorney General is represented by Barton Bowers.
Okay, we will hear first from counsel for Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Grant, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is Adam Grant. I'm here with Paula Mitchell. We were both counsel. We were both counsel for Mr. Wilson throughout his post-conviction proceedings. Mr. Wilson, through his counsel, would like to thank the Victims Compensation Board for this decision. It has been a long ordeal for Mr. Wilson starting in 1984, and it is particularly gratifying and meaningful for him to have been found factually innocent by the Superior Court and the Victims' Compensation Board. We would also like to thank the lawyers from Munger, Tolles, and Olson, who also represented Mr. Wilson in the last round of post-conviction litigation. We agree with the board's proposed decision wholeheartedly and encourage the board to pass this decision. And we thank all involved for their careful consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Grant. If Mr. Wilson is present, would he like to address the board as well?
Mr. Wilson is not present at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Grant. Okay, now we will hear from Mr. Bowers of the Attorney General's office.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Very good. The Attorney General also agrees with the final version of the proposed decision. We ask the board to grant it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bowers. Before we move to a vote, I just want to thank the claimants for bringing these claims and counsel for presenting them so diligently. Is there any discussion on this item for the board? Do I have a motion for item 10? Okay, a second?
I second.
Is there any public comment on this item?
Hearing none. Council, will you please call the roll?
Motion for consideration is adoption of the hearing officer's proposed decision in the Penal Code Section 4900 claim of Andrew Wilson. Member Shavaro.
Aye.
Member Becton.
Yes.
Chair Ravel.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Council. The board will now convene into closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 11126 sub C3 to discuss numbers 1 through 88 of the Victim Compensation Program. And board members, could you please turn off your cameras and audio inputs before joining the call? All right, we are reconvening into open session pursuant to Government Code Section 11126 sub C3. Do I have a motion for numbers 1 through 88 of the Victim Compensation Program, accepting number 5, which is recommended as an allow, and number 10, which we will be referring to staff for additional consideration?
I move staff recommendation on all items.
Second?
I second.
Thank you. Council, will you please call the roll?
Apologies, we actually had to move rooms, and so we are just getting back to the Zoom.
Sorry.
So give us a second. The council is just reconnecting here.
Okay, here's council. Okay, council, the motion before the board is to approve items number 1 through 88 of the Victim Compensation Program, accepting number 5, which is recommended as an allow, and number 10, which is being referred back to staff for additional consideration. And we have a motion and a second. So would you please call the roll?
Member Shavaro,
Aye.
Member Becton,
Aye.
Chair Ravel.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Is there any other business before the board today? Okay, seeing and hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Council, will you please call the roll?
Member Shavaro,
Aye.
Member Becton,
Aye.
Chair Ravel.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Oh, I thought we were gone. The next meeting is scheduled to occur on July 15th, 2021. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.